Hello, this is D, and I'm back with another video. Well, today we're going to take a look at the internet's reaction, or I should say Twitter particularly, reaction to the Xbox ABK deal. Now, we all know that the court case wrapped up, and we're all awaiting the judge's verdict. Now, most are under the impression that the FTC did not prove its case. However, we still have a few outliers that believe the opposite. So we're going to take a look at some of their views today. We're going to look at everything objectively. Of course, I don't agree with their assessment on the situation, but we do have to take a look at the facts. And did the FTC prove their case? Have they made any valuable, or I should say valid claims that Microsoft, the ABK acquisition, will create harm to the consumers? Because honestly, the only thing that they've proved so far is that it'll harm Sony in the sense that they won't have leverage on Call of Duty anymore on their platform. Now, Microsoft has promised not to remove this off of their platform, and that's what I want to get into before I get into some of the other stuff. And he goes on to say that Jim Ryan's counter proposal to Phil Spencer to allow Microsoft to acquire Activision Blizzard, ensure that all existing and future Activision Blizzard games are still available on PlayStation and have parity with Xbox. Now, I do believe that the majority of Activision games are going to be on the PlayStation, but I don't believe that Sony is in any type of position to dictate to Xbox what games should be on their platform when they are the #1 offender for having exclusive content. Do you all remember the Avengers game? Do you remember that there was a specific character that was locked in that game? Spider-Man. Spider-Man was only available on the PlayStation version of Avengers. Yet you have the FTC saying what would happen if Xbox were to have an exclusive pack or exclusive content for Call of Duty, how the PlayStation would be harmed and consumers. When you have Sony locking Spider-Man in the Avengers game to the PlayStation version. What about Hogwarts? Do you remember Hogwarts? That there was an entire mission that was exclusive to the PlayStation. Tell me how that's not bad for consumers. That's not any type of parity. So Sony is in no type of position to demand Xbox give them parity on all of their titles. Microsoft, Activision, they said that they would make sure that Call of Duty would be on their platform for 10 years, whether it be the PlayStation 5 or future versions of the PlayStation console, which is what the FTC is really arguing about in court. The access to Call of Duty. He goes on to say, don't make Activision Blizzard games more expensive than Xbox, which I don't think they would do. That wouldn't make any type of economical sense. And once again, I don't understand how Sony is trying to dictate that, because Sony was one of the first companies this generation to raise prices on their games. It's ridiculous. Treat all Activision Blizzard games equally on a subscription service of Xbox and PlayStation. Where is this coming from? First of all, their subscription service on the PlayStation, they don't allow games to go in there day and date. So this is just a bunch of nonsense, a bunch of wordplay, word salad, just trying to tie up this deal, trying not to sign this agreement. If you want your game in the service, we heard in the trial that you have to request it. They don't say, hey, put our games in the service. The companies request it. That's how it works on the PlayStation side. So they could easily go to Microsoft at that time and say, we'd like to put Call of Duty in our subscription service. They would pay the normal fees that you're supposed to pay and have the service in your subscription. Whatever, man. Upon completion of the acquisition of Activision, discard all contracts for financial and marketing support that Sony is due to pay Activision in the future. Now, whatever agreements you have with Activision, they're going to stay in place. This is for the future of Call of Duty. You don't get to renegotiate. Your deal expires in 2024. They're giving you a contract stating that Call of Duty will remain on your platform for 10 more years, which is unheard of in the industry. As things stand right now, Sony has a contract for Call of Duty on the PlayStation till 2024, and that's not the 2024 version of Call of Duty. So they would have to renegotiate anyways. And if we look at past contracts, it'd be like maybe a 3-year contract, maybe 4. It wouldn't be 10 years. They are getting a better deal now. They are ensured that this will be on their platform for 10 years. Agree to start discussions to treat Bethesda games equally on both PlayStation and Xbox. And this guy says naturally Phil Spencer rejected this offer from Jim Ryan. You want the Bethesda games that are exclusive to be on your platform. You're negotiating that in order to sign this Call of Duty deal? When your platform holds the most exclusives? Sony didn't seem to care when they were holding back that Spider-Man character in the Avengers. They didn't care when they had that special level in Hogwarts. Just recently, a pack has come out for Call of Duty with exclusive content on the PlayStation. Of course, Phil Spencer rejected this offer, and the judge is going to look at this. She's going to see right through this. So I don't know why fanboys are parading this out like it's some type of smoking gun. It was unreasonable. Phil was offering them Call of Duty on their platform, and it came back with a host of requirements, of demands. Now, another thing that you guys have been sending me a lot of information on is Colin Moriarty. He does a show, and he said some crazy stuff in this episode that is just out of there. So before I get into what I think about it, I'm going to let you guys get a little clip of it. And don't go on this guy's Twitter and harass the guy. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. I feel his opinion is wrong, but don't go harass him.
This is something that resonates with me because as I listen to the testimony and read the stories and read all the documents and the discovery, the thing that I'm brought back to, and this is just my honest take, and people can take it however they want, is that why are you so vociferously rooting for the company that's telling you they're so bad at this that they need to go buy things? Their entire course of operation throughout the entire case is how bad they are at it, that they can't do it. In fact, Phil Spencer had said about mobile gaming that they couldn't do it, quote unquote, organically, right? Like admitting it. Now that's maybe true, maybe not. But my biggest thing is not that you're rooting for an entity, right? I think about small market baseball teams. This is a weird example, and I know it's out of your wheelhouse, but in the MLB, unlike the NFL and the NHL, there is no salary cap, meaning that teams can spend whatever they want, like on players. So the Yankees often spend hundreds of millions of dollars more than other teams, while in the NFL, everyone spends the same amount of money. And so in the NFL, you have a lot of it is general management and coaching and obviously player skill and making the right choices, but it's all a level playing field. In the MLB, it's not. And the most impressive teams to baseball fans are not the big market teams that win, but the small market teams that win. You know, there's especially Tampa Bay Devil Rays. I think they're just called the Rays now. They are a notoriously small market team that doesn't spend any money and just drafts players and wins and does really well. That's impressive. And so when I look at the situation, I'm like, why are you rooting for someone who's bad at it, an entity that's bad at it, that has had more money than anyone to make this work and can't, that has since the very beginning tried to buy its way in? Of course, we always talk about Nintendo, but so many other things, and just blatantly throwing its money around. And of course, as we see here in these quotes, which we'll use, they have every intention of trying, or at least had every intention of trying to spend whatever they could to get whatever they wanted. This to me is a weird thing to root for. I don't get that. It's like they're basically going like, we suck. We can't make it work. Look how badly we're getting our asses beat. We need much more. It's like, why would you ever want any of these entities under their control when they can't do it? That doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, absolutely ridiculous. His analogy, I'm not even going to try to dissect it. It just doesn't make sense. But I'll say this, Microsoft is in third place. That's why this deal is so important. They want to bolster their Game Pass service. They want to have more games in their catalog. And I hear this argument all the time that Microsoft doesn't do it organically and Sony does it organically. Microsoft has Halo. Was that not organic? Microsoft has the Forza series, the regular Forza games and Forza Horizon. Gears of War. They have a lot of games that they created organically. Fable, which is coming out, I don't know, maybe next year. This is a Microsoft organic game. These were created by Microsoft back in the Xbox 360 era. These were huge games. Microsoft has a lot of organic games. But in a market where you have to compete, you got to do what you got to do. Sony is going out there and buying studios too. Sony is doing a bunch of third-party deals because they lack exclusive games. I'm not saying overall, I'm saying right now, currently. So they're money-hatting third-party games to have an exclusive on their platform, such as the latest Final Fantasy game. They don't have a lot of games coming out in the next 12 months. Spider-Man is like the biggest one, and that was not made by a studio that was with Sony from the start. They acquired Insomniac. So what are you talking about here? Microsoft wants to compete. You always complain. You guys always say that Microsoft has no games. Xbox has no games. They can't compete. And when they go out there to compete, you complain that they're not playing fair. What's not fair? Sony pays for a lot of exclusive content on their platform. What's wrong with Microsoft wanting to do that? You guys complain about Game Pass service and says it degrades games. It does not. It's just another way for gamers to get their games. If you don't like the Game Pass service, you're not forced to be in it. You can buy that game. But of course, you're not going to do that because the Game Pass service makes a lot of sense. And you know that Sony can't compete with Microsoft. And even the judge in the case said, why doesn't Sony compete? Why don't they release their games day and date on that service? Why don't they do a better job on their PlayStation Plus premium services so they can compete with Microsoft? Ridiculous. A bunch of dribble. And I can tell you right now, when this deal is announced in Microsoft's favor next week, we're going to see a lot of meltdowns on social media. And I'm going to be here for the enjoyment. I've got a lot of receipts. And boy, that video is going to be epic. Now, let's move on from this. I want to know what you guys think about that. So let me know in the comment section down below. I think his analogy is way off. I think there's nothing wrong with the way that Microsoft is competing. I think Sony is just a crybaby. And I think all of their fans right now are extremely salty. They're in their feelings. And it's ridiculous. And it continues. Icon Era, they wrote an article on this. Microsoft's disastrous display and how their reputation has been harmed from this hearing. And I don't know what hearing they were watching. It's unbelievable. The facts are not in this guy's favor, whoever posted this article. It's ridiculous. Now we're gonna go over to Tweaktown and we're gonna take a look at some of these things here and then we're gonna wrap this video up. I'm trying not to make this a long video. It's a long weekend here in Canada. It's our Canada Day weekend. And I know in the States, it's the 4th of July weekend. We're just celebrating it in different ways for our country. So we do the same thing, fireworks, the cookout, everything. We celebrate Canada's independence just like you do in the United States. Anyways, let's get into it. The FTC explains how Microsoft Activision merger will harm consumers and the competition. And that's what they were setting out to do in the court case this week. They wanted to prove this to the judge that this deal will harm consumers. Now, to the contrary, in my opinion, it showed that this will actually help consumers. More people will have access to these games. It's better for other businesses because they'll be able to sell and share these games. It's good for everybody involved, and I really believe the FTC didn't prove their case. But let's take a look at the other side of the coin. Now, the FTC believes that the $68.7 billion Microsoft Activision merger would harm competition in the video games market across multiple dimensions, including the high-performance console market and the subscription and cloud gaming market. Throughout the case, we've heard testimony from key witnesses that the real various methods, strategies, and scenarios employed by the Xbox games business to gain competition edge across all dimensions of the gaming market, and how Xbox plans to use Activision to further its plans to eventually deliver over $32 billion in revenues and become the market leader by 2030. Nothing is wrong with that if you want to become the market leader, especially when you're in third place. I don't understand how the FTC can protect Sony and their interests when they are the market leader. How is that good for competition? How is that good for the consumers, especially when your arguing points are what Sony currently does? You're accusing Microsoft of doing A and B when Sony is doing A, B, and C. It's ridiculous. This case attempts to examine the fluid and rapidly changing video games market and use that lens to gauge the potential anti-competitive effects that may rise in effort to justify a preliminary injunction for the federal judge Jacqueline Scott Corley. The FTC seeks to acquire such an order to stall the combining of Microsoft and Activision until it can complete its Phase 3 investigation. So they want to hold up this deal to do their Phase 3 investigation. Ridiculous. You've had enough time to investigate this case. The evidence just doesn't support the FTC's claims. It's to the contrary. Now, it goes on to say if the order is granted, the FTC could tie up the merger plans with years of litigation and proceedings, potentially causing Microsoft to abandon the merger. Now, Microsoft has said such that if this gets blocked, they're not going to go any further. They're going to abandon it. And Activision said the same. So if this judge rules in favor of the FTC, this deal is dead. And if the preliminary injunction is denied, Microsoft can close the deal. Yes, the FTC, they can appeal it, but they don't usually appeal. They don't do that. And their appeal time wouldn't be quick enough because they wouldn't be able to file for an appeal, I think, till like 10 days after this decision. Microsoft would be able to close this deal 5 days after the decision. There is a 5-day cooldown period on the temporary restraining order. And then after that, they could close the deal. The FTC's case would be pretty much lost. Now, they can continue with their court case in August and try to continue suing Microsoft. But at that point in time, the deal will be done. And if they were to win, they could only find Microsoft. So I want that to be clear. Now, here is a quick summary of what the FTC was arguing. Sony could be harmed, and just reading this title, it's ridiculous, by a reduction in quality and delay of Activision Blizzard games as a result of Sony withholding dev kits from the publisher. Sony does not want to provide dev kits early or access privileged information to the AB on post-merger basis because Sony is worried about supplying trade secrets to a competitor. Now, I'll say this is pretty fair. I understand Sony's position here, but it's your choice. And the judge pointed this out. And Microsoft's lawyers also pointed this out. It is your choice to withhold the dev kit. And in reality, this would only really affect some launch titles, because once the systems are both out, there's no reason to withhold the dev kits. I think they could get around this by supplying a basic dev kit that would be omitted of certain things, but they could get the base performance out of it. Because let's be honest, both next generation systems, they're going to be pretty close. There's going to be differences, obviously, but I don't think it's going to be like one is 80% and the other one runs like at 120%. You know what I'm saying? They're going to be close enough. Now, they go on to say that consumers could be harmed by a reduction of choice if full Activision Blizzard games are withheld full foreclosure or content is made exclusive to the Xbox, partial foreclosure. Now, this is ridiculous because Microsoft, once again, I gotta keep saying this, has offered Sony a contract for this game to be on their service multiple times. So we're just gonna skip over this part. Consumers could be harmed if Activision Blizzard games ship late on PlayStation as a result of late dev kits. Harm to Sony could also harm consumers, especially people who play games on Sony's platform. Once again, this is Sony's choice. And this would only be Call of Duty, really. They could send Activision the base metrics of their system because these games are really created on PC. Yes, of course, you want to have the dev kits so you see how it runs on the system. But if you have a baseline performance metric of what this system can achieve, they can pretty much do it on PC. And I don't know. It's really down to Sony here. I do understand their point here, so I don't want to say they don't have a point at all, but it's up to you whether you want to send them that dev kit. Be smart. Let them sign a contract where they can't disclose what is inside of that console, where there would be financial harm if they did. There's ways around this. I don't think it's a big deal as Sony is making out to be, but I do think it's a legitimate concern. However, not enough of a concern to block this deal. That is ridiculous. Now, the cloud gaming market could be harmed as Microsoft dictates growth on the market through Windows operating licenses. The theory is that Microsoft picks and chooses who will make cloud deals with. Microsoft makes deals with NVIDIA, who runs the largest cloud company competitor with GeForce Now, and sweetened the pot by offering Windows agreement that may have significantly lowered the Windows operating license requirement to operate GFN in exchange for approval and signature of a 10-year licensing agreement with Microsoft that could be seen as a form of behavioral remedy. Now, once again, Microsoft's lawyers stood up in court and said, so what? This is how business is done. It doesn't matter if we sweeten the deal for them. It matters that we got it done. And your complaint is that consumers won't have access to the game. It doesn't matter how we got there. We got there. And consumers will have access to Call of Duty. And the judge argued that more consumers will have access to Call of Duty and asked the FTC to explain to her how this is bad for consumers, how this deal will harm the consumer by more of them having availability of this game by using GeForce Now, by using a Nintendo Switch in the future. It just didn't make sense. And all these guys saying that Microsoft had such a disastrous showing in court, I don't know what case they were watching. It sounds like a case of cope to me. They're just trying to deal with it. And that tells me that next week when the decision comes down, there's going to be a lot of hurt feelings. Now, harm in the console market. Now, right off the bat, I'm going to tell you guys, this is a waste of time. They definitely did not prove their case. Now, the FTC said the merger is permanent to the judge. Once they decide to merge, they come together. We heard about the harms, for example, to Sony in terms of optimization. We're concerned about the harm to consumers. Now, this is really funny here. And this is how you can see whoever's writing this article has a little bit of bias in there, because she didn't say we're concerned about the harm to consumers. She said it's not about Sony. It's about the harm to consumers. It's about the consumers. Let's put that part in there. I don't understand why it's omitted, because it's a big part. It shows that the judge is aware of Sony's practices. and is also aware that the FTC's case is kind of weak. They've been arguing for Sony a lot instead of the consumers, and the FTC is supposed to represent the consumers. Now, the FTC responded, "We aren't here to protect Sony. We're here to protect the consumer. If the deal goes forward, Sony delays shipping development kits to Activision. Sony will be delayed to shipping games to consumers." Now, Microsoft's lawyer argued that it was only Minecraft, not other games, where the dev kit was an issue. And as you know, there is no PlayStation 5 version of Minecraft. The other games, Minecraft Legends and Minecraft Dungeons, are on the PS5. So this is a native version running on the PlayStation 5, proving once again that they can do business. It was just the dev kit that affected the initial Minecraft game. But to be honest with you guys, not even Xbox has that version on their game. So it was also affected on their platform. It affected everybody. And it was due to Sony's selfishness. And I gotta be honest with you, although I do see their point, there is ways around it, and there's contracts that they can sign to make sure that that information doesn't come out to other departments within Microsoft. Now, the judge said Microsoft provides dev kits to Sony, and there's no testimony that they delay it. I would say the PlayStation is more of an issue. Once again, Microsoft sent Sony dev kits. There was no issue about it. And whatever games that they needed them for, they were granted in the regular time. And you know this is the case because Sony would have brought this up. The FTC would have brought that up. Now, Microsoft's lawyer went on to say that it's really Mr. Ryan's choice. It once again was a business strategy that he can pursue. Corley answered, Sony is making a decision for its own consumers. Microsoft responded saying this is not a behavior that is caused by us. It's not competitive harm. Now, the FTC said we're talking about harms in the marketplace, and the competitive strategy response does not nullify the harm. The fact that Microsoft owning Activision, that a rational competitive response is that I can't give you my dev kits. The judge asked, how do I know it's a rational response? The FTC said it's a hypothetical that Xbox has the games. Sony is only hurting itself by not giving the dev kits. The only reason it would be that is because it's worried it would give up secret sauce on their console to the consuming public. Now your game is late. Now, Microsoft responded saying there's no evidence of partial foreclosure. I ticketed with a list of partial foreclosure optimization, security, etc. Jim Ryan's declaration discussed that partial foreclosure would cause people to switch to Xbox. Microsoft continues to say if we're talking about dev kits, we have Minecraft. It was his choice. He did not say it was a competitive harm. Xbox has not gained any market share with Sony since that happened. By suggesting there's a possibility, anyone can dream up possibilities. Now we move on to harm in the subscription and cloud gaming markets. The judge said, let's move on to Game Pass and the cloud. And the FTC said, quite simply, the traditional market is consoles. The next big thing to have developed is multi-game library subscriptions market and the cloud. Subscription is more developed. It's like a Netflix. You pay a monthly fee. You get access to a library of games. Some services are just a library. Some of them are the library and a cloud, like Xbox Ultimate. Some are just a cloud. These markets are more emergent. Subscription is more established. The locus of competition is fierce in both. The axis of competition is price and content. We've seen from Microsoft and their emphasis on the cloud. The emphasis on subscription, Game Pass is a strategic driver for the Xbox business. The effect of this transaction on Microsoft's ability to turbocharge Game Pass to leave everyone in the dust and build a content moat is in the record and compelling. There is a concern if you take the content and use it to your advantage on your platform, and the consumer is harmed because there's no benefit. Now, Judge Corley says he's not putting it on Sony or Microsoft subscription. It is on PlayStation Plus, but some of his games are on the PlayStation Plus, and that was the FTC's response. To believe that Activision will put its content on more subscription services is to act on the money and the interests of the shareholders. He explained very clearly that he will look after the interests of the shareholders. We feel there are concerns about locking up Activision content to subscription services. Now, Judge Corley asked what happens to NVIDIA. We hope NVIDIA can survive. Now, when this was said, I lost my mind. I was tweeting it out like, whose mans is this? They just said they hope NVIDIA can survive. Does this guy know who NVIDIA is? They are $1 trillion company. They are the market leaders in GPUs. They are the market leaders in the cloud. What is he talking about? Anyways, he goes on to say we want competition to be robust in a world where we have a content arms race and we end up with 1 or 2 or 3 dominant players in the cloud and subscription service. It's a less competitive world. And like right there, he lost me when he said, we hope NVIDIA can survive. That has got to be the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Unbelievable. Now you're seeing the level of incompetence of the FTC. If you can't do your basic homework, you're saying that you hope NVIDIA can survive? The same NVIDIA that signed a deal to have access to these Activision games in their cloud? Really? Now, the FTC says the evidence has established a concern and raised substantial questions about the concern. Mr. Spencer was worried about a domino effect, that if somebody buys one content, they have to buy this content, and we end in a world where we have less choice. We have seen the evidence in Microsoft's own documents, the emphasis on Game Pass, the value of content, the fact that content leads to subscriptions and scale, and we saw it over and over again. So we're going to skip through a little part here, but the judge basically said that she doesn't believe that cloud gaming is a thing now. She does agree that it is growing. And she goes on to say, but I think that we don't have any DVDs anymore in that sense that everything went digital. That's the way things are going. Consoles are going to disappear eventually. And she basically said the cloud is not a concern for now, and the FTC is concerned about the future, but it's not happening right now. Now, Microsoft's lawyers argued that many startups have folded, and we know that. Stadia is one example. Google's Stadia failed. I don't think it failed because the service was bad. It was their model. It was a horrible business model. You have to pay full price for these games that you didn't own. They should have been a lot cheaper, and I think the service would have survived if they were doing more of a subscription service on par with Microsoft and Game Pass. I think they'd still be around. Now, Judge Corley addressed her question to Microsoft's lawyer, and she said, what are you saying in respect to cloud argument? That the merger is pro-competitive? What is that, other than to say? And Microsoft said it is a feature. It's with Xbox. It's only offered with Game Pass. You don't have to buy it as a separate product. The entire merger is pro-competitive because it's expanding the output. They go on to say that the FTC couldn't answer a key question. Is it likely that PlayStation will or not have these Xbox games without the merger? You're going to have it with all the other streaming services. So if that is a market, they're going to have the ability to stream that game. Now, this is where things get really interesting. And this is what I think is the turning point for the case and why I think Judge Corley is going to rule in Microsoft's favor. Now, she goes on to say, I get when you brought the case that the cloud issue wasn't there. In substance, you won, but you got what you wanted, and you forced them to go out and enter into these agreements. They went out and signed these agreements now with NVIDIA. How is that not good for consumers? Now, the FTC said we have testimony from Mr. Zimmering and NVIDIA about the profitability and the future of the cloud. And basically, the FTC was saying that NVIDIA has a problem with certain things in the contract. And the judge just wasn't buying that. Now, she said, why would NVIDIA do what they did and say what they said when they're a competitor to Microsoft in the cloud? And she further went on to say, why did the Switch also support it? And the FTC said they got a deal that they had been wanting for a long time on Microsoft's own content. There's a deal that could have been achieved. Absent of the deal, it was a sweetener. And that's pretty much it. I don't want to go more into this. We know that they talked a little bit about Stadia. And Stadia failed. And like I said, Stadia didn't fail because of Microsoft. They failed because of their own business practices. I got to be honest, their model was horrible. I did have Stadia. I was day one on Stadia. And I can say that the service, it ran well. The latency was probably the best out of all the providers to this day. It was really good. But the content was expensive. And if you already own the content, you have to pay full price to play it on their service. And it just didn't make sense. Now, the FTC said the public equity is that the harms in this case start immediately once Microsoft purchases Activision. Now, Microsoft said that's not true with respect to Call of Duty because their license will expire in 2024. So how can it be withholding it if Sony won't agree? So once again, Sony only has an agreement to 2024. Microsoft, Activision, they're offering him a deal way past that date. Now, Judge Corley said Call of Duty released in November will be released on the PlayStation. Your August 2 hearing can go forward and nothing is going to happen. You guys should address it in your submissions. So once again, the judge is pointing to the August hearing that the FTC has. And she says you can continue to argue your case there. She said that at the beginning of this hearing that, no, if this doesn't go your way, you can continue to argue your case. You can still continue to sue Microsoft, which just tells me that the ruling is not favorable for the FTC. I really feel that Microsoft proved their case. Now, we're looking at all the evidence here. You guys have seen the trial. You guys have seen my coverage. And I think I've laid down everything quite well. So I'm confident that you all have a grasp on the situation. And there's a lot at stake here. Microsoft is really trying to compete here. And I do believe when this deal goes through, they're going to be in a much better position to compete with Sony. And Sony knows that. And the fanboys that are writing these articles and the outlets that are writing these anti-Xbox articles, they all know this. Yet these same people that are out here campaigning for this deal not to go through were the same that were always saying that Microsoft can't compete, that Microsoft doesn't have any games. And always they move the goalposts. Now things are not organic. Like everything that Sony does is organic. Like nothing that Microsoft did was organic. It's ridiculous. And I just can't wait till this whole ordeal is over. And I know you guys that have been following this can't wait for that as well. And this week, I believe Wednesday at the earliest, we are going to know what Judge Corley's ruling is. And like I've said before, I believe it's going to go in favor of Microsoft. And there's going to be a lot of receipts. And we're going to dish them out here because these guys were going hard in the paint and they deserve to be held accountable for their comments. As I've said, Sony is the leader in the market. They're the leader of exclusive content. They money had a lot of games. They pay for third-party games to skip Xbox. They have special packs on their platform. All the things that the FTC is accusing Microsoft of doing, Sony currently does it. They just released Final Fantasy exclusively on the PlayStation. Not even PC got it. They paid to keep it off of Xbox everywhere just so they could have it. And that's not a studio that they own. It's not organic. Yet people are always screaming that Sony is the best and they do everything organically. That was not organic. Make it make sense. Anyways, I want to know what you guys think about all of this. So let me know in the comment section down below. I'll be back next week where the decision comes down from the ruling and we're going to talk about it further. And like I said, we're going to give out some receipts. Until then, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you guys on the next one.